Welcome back to a very special episode of Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon Hatfield. This week I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond. And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Happy Movember, Damon.
Thank you. Yes, it is Movember indeed. However, my Movember will be coming to an end shortly when it's time for our family photos in just a couple of weeks. But I digress. We have two birthdays to celebrate this week. Both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S just celebrated their third birthday. Both these consoles were launched in November 2020. So as we like to do each year, we like to allow our experts, Max and Ryan, to sort of grade the performance of their respective platforms, see how they're doing 3 years into their lifespans. We should be around the, well, it used to be the halfway point, but console generations last longer now than they used to. Max, let's start with the PlayStation 5. Before I get your thoughts, let me attempt to sort of summarize where Sony and the PS5 are right now. In terms of console exclusives, games that you need a PS5 to play if you're going to play on a console, games that you can't also play on PS4. It's a nice, actually, little library of games here, including Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man Remastered, Baldur's Gate 3 for now, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Gran Turismo 7, Returnal, the Demon's Souls remake, and Astro's Playroom. That's not even counting the PSVR 2 library. And everything but Spider-Man Remastered and Baldur's Gate 3 are actually true PS5 console exclusives. And what a lineup of games. There's not a dud among them. In terms of hardware, they have a lot of cool features on their DualSense controller, although I would argue that those features are generally underutilized by most games. And I don't know about you guys, but I have to charge my DualSense controller almost every single day, whereas my Xbox controller with batteries will just last on and on and on and on. Of course, PS5 has a great VR solution with PSVR 2. It is, it's a great VR device, but although it is expensive and I think also underutilized by Sony, undersupported. But there's an expanding hardware lineup for the PS5. We got the PS5 Slim coming this month. The PlayStation Portal is coming soon. We have a new headset and wireless earbuds. The sort of like PlayStation hardware family is growing rapidly. And for services, PlayStation Plus, which was revamped last year, recently went through a price increase. The essential tier is $80 a year, extra is $135 a year, and the premium is $160 a year. It does not get day one exclusives like Xbox Game Pass does. However, it does include a lot of great games like Horizon Forbidden West, Returnal, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Doom Eternal, Guardians of the Galaxy, Inside, and many more. And in sales, the PS5 has sold over 41.7 million units as of August, making it right now the 11th best-selling home console of all time. So, all that said, Max, how are you feeling about the PlayStation 5 3 years in?
I don't know who I'm going to piss off this episode, but I have my bones to pick with the PlayStation 5. Obviously, It's doing just great because it sold 40-something million units, and anything I say doesn't matter because, again, it's doing great. But I think also, as far as how it's actually, delivering on the promises that it sort of set out with, the DualSense, we kind of knew that was a little gimmicky going in, but I feel like it really is pretty underwhelmingly utilized. The extremely cool, fast hard drive speed, we see that in bits and pieces, but really only in like the first-party stuff. Like really, like the Spider-Man fast travel, mind-blowing to see it in action. I wish we saw more of that, but that sort of, that issue of having proprietary tech that maybe not all third-party studios want to knuckle down and actually deal with. They would rather just make something that kind of works fine on both platforms. The price increase stuff is not great. Everything's getting price increases across the board. We talked about this a few weeks ago, but this is the first PlayStation generation that it's gotten a price hike 3 years in rather than a price drop, which is usually the case. Which that sucks. It honestly, a lot about this generation reminds me of the bad years of the PS3. There's a sort of hubris coming out of Sony that isn't it's not very customer friendly. It's not much fun really. And again, like the sort of the things that I wish they were doing, they're not. But who am I to say? PSVR 2 especially is just baffling because it seems like Sony has pretty much forgotten that thing exists. You bought one. How's that going?
I very publicly stated on and got quite a response that I regret spending that money, and I still regret it.
Well, here's the thing.
I want it to be awesome. That's why I bought it, but it's just not.
Yeah. You opened up yours and took it out of the box, which is more than we can say for Jada, who's on Beyond every week, and she's had some fun with the one in the office, but like she's just like I might trade it in or something. But anyway, we're getting off topic. The PS5 itself. it's again, it's had some great games. Just overall, like I think it's winning the popularity contest, but it's I think grades wise, I'm gonna put it as C. I think that there's it's I don't know, it's continuing to be expensive and getting more expensive. They upped the price of PS Plus and then didn't really do much. They added 100 films. You got to install a weird third-party streaming app, and you can watch such hits as 1995's Screamers. I don't know. It's a weird time. It's also, compared to Game Pass, where Microsoft might not have the greatest first-party lineup right now, but there's a ton of cool day one stuff, and there's a kind of when there's not quality, there is quantity, and I think there's something really fun about that. And there's also, they're very clear with the messaging about what you get with Game Pass. I regularly still forget the exact nomenclature of the particular PlayStation tiers because they don't want any of them to sound worse than any of the other ones. So.
Interesting takes there. Ryan, from where you sit over, usually covering the Xbox side of things, how do you feel like Sony's doing?
I mean, like Max said, the success is unequivocal. It's just inarguable. The MVP of the entire generation, Sony or otherwise, is Insomniac. I mean, that's you've got that in your corner if you're a Sony player. The price increases, which we haven't completely felt in North America, but now we kind of are with these slims. So it's, maybe we'd want to ask our European and other international friends about how they feel about that. I will say at the end of the day, as the lesson Microsoft has been just punished over and over for not learning. They're still now finally getting it, but exclusives are like on the list of what's important to any console. Exclusives is like number one by a country mile. Like everything else, hardware, services, backwards compatibility, that kind of stuff is all important, but so much further down the list. And Sony does still have an excellent roster of first-party exclusives. So I see where you're coming from, Max, on all those complaints and nitpicks and your sort of overall thoughts. But sitting here as the Xbox guy, software, like exclusives-wise, would I still trade places with you right now after 3 years? Yes, I would.
Interesting. Well, let's take a look at Xbox things, Ryan. I think by my count, the Xbox console exclusives right now would include Starfield, Redfall, Hi-Fi Rush, Forza Motorsport, and Flight Simulator.
We don't talk about Redfall, Damon.
We're
talking about Redfield, Chris Redfield. Yeah. Resident Evil, hit game.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, but in terms of hardware, I think maybe we're starting to see signs that maybe the Series S is actually holding the X back. And I think they had to work something out behind closed doors to get Baldur's Gate 3 running on the Series X. And then, of course, the real selling point to the Xbox is Game Pass, the service. Core is $10 a month, PC is $10 a month, console is $11 a month, and then Ultimate is $17 a month, which is $204 a year. Quite a bit more expensive than PlayStation Plus, although you do get those exclusives on day one, in addition to all sorts of other great games like the Dead Space remake, Lies of P, Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey, Darkest Dungeon, Dead Cells, Doom Eternal, so much more. In terms of sales, we actually do have some sales data thanks to a leaked document in Brazil. 21 million sold as of June, which would make it the 17th best-selling console of all time. So, Ryan, how do you feel like the Xbox is doing 3 years in?
Honestly, better than I thought when we originally had our pre-production meeting and we're talking about this. When I went out and actually did the homework, it's better than I thought. So the launch, software-wise, was not good. It was just there was no reason game-wise to buy a Series X right at launch. But then we got this great year in 2021 that we thought was going to just send Microsoft back up to the stratosphere, and we're going to get this great run of first-party exclusives and other big games. We had IGN's 2021 Game of the Year, Forza Horizon 5. We had Halo Infinite, which, yes, while it's been reasonably criticized for its post-launch support, it launched as a great single-player game, great campaign, and great arena multiplayer. We had Microsoft Flight Simulator, which isn't for everyone, but it is a It is technologically brilliant and an incredible simulator. If you are into planes and flying around the world, there's literally no better option to do that. There's been a few small time exclusives, and then 2022, bone dry. We were kind of back in the doldrums, but now you mentioned Starfield. Of course, Redfall did not pan out, but Forza Motorsport's back, and it's excellent. And so the games wise, and then I think in the span of this first 3-year report card that we're doing, we certainly want to include the purchase of Activision Blizzard in there as something that, okay, we're not reaping the rewards of that as Xbox players today, but that is now, they own that, and that is now something that's going to be part of the platform and the portfolio for a while. And then the Bethesda acquisition, which technically was announced before this generation started. I went back and looked, it was September of 2020. So literally 2 months before this generation started, but the deal was finalized during this console generation. So they've spent $76.5 billion or $77 billion between the two of those to grow the Xbox portfolio and the studio group. So, but then I think when you look at the services, like look at backwards compatibility. I mean, they've led the way, led the industry on that. They've dragged Sony kicking and screaming. They've taken a lot of older games and made them better with things like FPS boost and giving 4K to some of these older games as well. Of course, Game Pass, you mentioned, Damon, that has had so many great day one games, not just the first party stuff, but a lot of great third party day one games as well. I mean, look, for the purposes of this show where we're here to pretend argue with each other, MLB The Show, which is a phenomenal baseball simulation video game every single year, developed by Sony, comes out on day one as part of your Game Pass subscription every year, which doesn't happen on the PlayStation console. So there's just lots of great software and services reasons to get excited. So it's been, Damon, a better 3-year start than I kind of originally thought.
So if you were to assign a grade to Xbox's performance, what would that be?
This is going to be quite the comment section between what you had to say and what I had
everyone,
to say.
please be nice. We're just having a conversation.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yep,
I would honestly, I would give it a solid B, not B minus, not B plus. It is those top tier exclusives that hold it down for me, because I really think they've nailed everything else. I mean, they've gotten pretty much everything else right. I think it's worth noting for both of these consoles, but certainly I'm speaking about Xbox here because of the fortunately now ancient history with the Red Ring of Death. But the Xbox Series, both of them, the Series S and Series X, have been problem-free. We have gone through these 3 years. You don't hear, not that they're like 100%. Every piece of machinery has problems sometimes, but there's just been no widespread anything at all whatsoever. These have been incredibly well-built consoles on the Xbox side, and I think it's probably fair to say on the PlayStation 5 side as well. So that as somebody who lived through the Red Ring of Death era, I think that's worth calling out as well. So it's been a great start for Xbox, but we're still in that spot of that kind of like, well, it's gonna be better. We're still kind of waiting for the glory days, but it has still been really good even to this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we look to 2024, which platform do we feel has the sort of brighter immediate future? Because I feel like there's just a lot more announced games that we know of coming from Xbox than from PlayStation. PlayStation, we know it has Insomniac's Wolverine. We don't know about much else, I don't think. I mean, in early 2024, of course, PS5 will get Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But over on the Xbox side of things, there's just so many games. And I'm not saying these are all coming in 2024, but Hellblade 2, Fable, Avowed, Indiana Jones, Perfect Dark, the list just seems to go on and on. So I don't know, Max, how are you feeling about, moving on to 2024?
I mean, everything you just said is true. Like Xbox has a lot to look forward to. There's that that thing where they show a bunch of cool trailers and get us all excited. Like Fable, for instance. I feel like it's gonna be a cool minute before we're actually playing that game. That said, it's nice to have a little bit of that. I wish Sony wasn't so buttoned up. We talk about this on Beyond regularly when there's nothing to talk about because Sony hasn't announced anything. But yeah, I mean, they don't need to change anything because clearly they're selling game consoles just fine. So it's just us griping. But like, I don't know. Like, I'm looking forward to Wolverine. I think that's going to be a great game when it comes out.
too.
I hope it comes out soon. I don't know when it's coming out. Like, we know, I don't know, Death Stranding 2, maybe, could be multi-plat. Do we know if that's console exclusive? PlayStation?
I would imagine it
Yeah, I guess
is.
the first one was.
Because Kojima's working on something
Yeah.
else with Microsoft.
Yeah, that one that keeps getting leaked and then not revealed.
Yeah.
Anyway, the thing is, I want to point to Game Pass again. Like, Game Pass is phenomenal, and if there's a game that you maybe aren't interested in, you're like, I'll give it a shot, and it's just right there. It's a really wonderful experience. If Sony wanted to get an A from me, they could have, remastered Bloodborne or made Bloodborne 2, but the closest thing to Bloodborne 2 that we got this year was Lies of P, which I jumped into on Game Pass because it was
Day one.
Day one, free right there. That was cool. I don't know. Somebody could have probably scooped that up and threw it on PlayStation Plus, but they didn't. And I'm just, it's kind of hard to sit here and be like, they're doing great. They are doing great. They're doing great. And they have made money from the thing that they're selling, which is really that's the end game there. But looking at what Microsoft's doing, they're planning ahead. They scooped up a bunch of amazing studios and like that's it. Is it a complicated, problematic, questionable thing in the grand scheme of capitalism? Maybe it could be a monopoly. I don't know. It's not their first rodeo in that department, but like. I don't.
Well, and what would concern me as a PlayStation fan, and I do own a PlayStation 5, so I am a PlayStation fan, and these aren't necessarily bad things, but they might be. They're just, again, they're reasons for kind of some concern is one, who's going to take over the business? Jim Ryan's leaving, and you can say, we can have that discussion of what's his legacy, what's the book going to say on him when it's all said and done here in a few months. But it's like, who's going to take over? What's the direction going to be? And then the other thing that would concern me a little bit as a PlayStation owner would be Sony seems to really want to pivot to a lot of multiplayer and live service games. Mm-hmm. That is factual. Those are their studios they have a lot of those plans in the works. We got one of those teaser trailers at one of the PlayStation showcases. Was that Jade Raymond's studio? I can't even remember the name. I just remember the trailer being really weird and vague.
And it looked like Hyenas, which has since been.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anyway, so not that in and of itself is a bad thing, but the entire strength. I mean, the entire PlayStation brand has arguably, or at least its reputation, has been built on these incredible, premier, top-shelf single-player experiences. And that's not to say that they won't do the same for multiplayer and live service games, but I think if there were, personally speaking, if there was one genre that I could just take behind the building and shoot it in the head, it would be the live service game. WB just said today as we record this, they were like, we're going to take all of our main franchises and they're going to be live service games.
Until they're not, because they often take their own, services.
And it's just like, so basically, if, so you put a gun to Rocksteady's head and said, this is going to be a live service game, and effectively ruined everything Rocksteady had built in terms of their reputation. So I just hope Sony's not about to make the mistake that we're watching WB make in real time right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we heard that they, I think, had something like 9 live service games in development. I would be very curious to see how many of those actually see the light of day. If any of those have been, like we heard that the biggest announcement to come out of Naughty Dog this year is that they're like calming things down on development with The Last of Us multiplayer, to be like, hey, it's the anniversary of The Last of Us. We're still working on it, but less people are working on it now. And then we heard that there were like layoffs, and it was just kind of like, that's not great. The weird thing about Sony right now is that we know about more movie and TV PlayStation products in development than games. Just yesterday we heard about like rumors of like a Bloodborne movie, and there's also there's a Horizon show coming to Netflix. There's a bunch of these getting kicked around, and there's a Twisted Metal show. There's a Last of Us show. Like it's I guess that's cool. They're fun. It's great. But as far as like what I'm actually using my $500 PlayStation for, I don't know. Games are fun too. It'd be nice to know what's in store there because I don't know. Yeah, looking ahead, it's a weird time to be a PlayStation owner.
Ryan, how do you feel about Xbox in 2024?
Real good. You already covered a number of the games, Damon, so I won't repeat them. But there's also the idea of some, okay, even if it's existing Activision Blizzard stuff, but some of that stuff going, or all of it maybe, going into Game Pass day one. Like we know from a loose-lipped actor that next year's Call of Duty game, which will be Treyarch back in the driver's seat for that one, is, I'm making up a title here. This might not be the exact title, but it's going to be Black Ops Gulf War. And so, like, what if that's day one on Game Pass? Like, that's how many subscriptions does that help move? Diablo 4 is going to continue to get updated and supported. We've got seasonal content. We've got an expansion that's going to come out this time next year. All that. If Diablo 4 goes into Game Pass, how many more players is that? How much more, how much more success is that for Microsoft on the bottom line? Microsoft's going to start. Phil is going to start greenlighting a bunch of ideas that the Activision studio and Blizzard studios want to do. There's going to, but in terms of 2024, again, Damon, you mentioned some of them, but we are getting Final Fantasy 14 finally. I know we're very late to the party on that,
sure.
But that's nice, right? We are, we're hopefully just gonna get some more surprises, more updates on things we haven't heard about in a while. There's a third party, an Avalanche game, Contraband, that got announced, and we haven't heard a damn thing about it since. So maybe that comes back up too. So for the immediate near term, there's a lot to be optimistic about for 2024 on the Xbox side of things.
Well, one thing's for certain is that as both of these consoles turn 3, that means this show is about to turn 4, as it was started in January of 2020 in the run-up to both these consoles. And I don't think any of us expected to still be here, almost 4 years in, talking about both these consoles every week after week, but we're so glad all of you have stuck with us and are still watching the show. Something we thought was maybe going to be a limited run series ended up being one of the tentpoles on IGN's programming. So thank you all so much for sticking with us, and we'll move forward. We'll continue following all the new-gen hardware announcements in the new year.
Just go right into 2028. Yep. Just keep it riding right into the next round of consoles.
We believe in generations.
We'll have Xbox Brooklyn coming out next year. There's always something to talk about. Here's a poll for our audience to vote on. We want to know, what do you think was the best generation of video games? 8-bit, 16-bit, PlayStation, N64, PS2, GameCube, Xbox, PS3, 360, Wii, or PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live. We'll share the results with you in a future episode. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our LA and San Francisco studios to make this episode possible. My name is Damon. I hope everyone is having a safe and enjoyable holiday weekend out there. We'll see you next time.